that we are now looking, most likely, the way the seats have fallen, at another Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael-led government. That is certainly something that is disappointing to us and to those who voted for us and who voted for change. We don't believe that the election is a massive endorsement of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. They still only had about 40% support. 60% of people didn't vote for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. But the way the seats have fallen, it looks clear that they will form the government. And one of the main messages we have following our discussion, and it's consistent with what we said throughout the election campaign, is that we think parties that would consider themselves left or who offered themselves as some sort of left alternative to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael should not now join Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and prop them up in a continuation of their rule. So we believe what parties that would consider themselves left now need to do is form a strong left opposition in the Dáil to resist the policies of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And we would remind everybody that while there's a lot of interesting discussion about the numbers and government formation, that the exit poll reflected what we were getting on the doorstep, which is the major issues that concern people in this country are housing, the cost of living, special needs and disability, the crisis in our health service, and indeed issues like Palestine. And we believe those who would consider themselves or see themselves on the left need to form a serious left bloc in the Dáil to take on this government and to fight and represent the wishes and the aspirations of the people on those critical issues. And that left opposition shouldn't just be a Dáil opposition, but it also needs to be an opposition outside the Dáil. Obviously, we are disappointed with the fact that left government, which we advocated for, has not come into being and is not on the agenda at the moment. And there is no doubt that a historically low turnout among the people who probably needed change most, who were affected by the crises we face in our society, is a reality. Young people, neglected working class communities, we saw a low turnout. But we think we need to be a left alternative to this government, and a left challenge to this government, need to be fighting inside and crucially outside on those issues, leading movements of people power to fight for the affordable housing we need, to fight for the resources for special needs and disability, to fight for the safe staffing levels we need in our health services, to address the profiteering and the cost of living crisis, and to continue to stand with the people of Palestine. And the last thing I would just say is that while inevitably there's going to be a lot of discussion about the government formation, who might go in with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and we are urging parties who consider themselves on the left not to be a prop for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, we also think that urgently issues need to be addressed now. Record numbers of children are going to be in emergency accommodation, some of them for the second or even third Christmas over the coming weeks. And it is issues like that and the suffering and hardship that working class people and young people are suffering needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency, and that is our priority. And we call on those who see themselves on the left to recognise that and to begin to build movements of opposition to challenge the failed policies of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which have so badly left down working class people and young people in this country in particular.
Richard, you say that, but yet you didn't include, when you were writing to the other opposition parties of the left, you didn't include the Labour Party in that, who are now the ones most likely, if anyone, to go in with the government. So, I mean, is this not reaping what you sow? You didn't ask the Labour Party to be part of your transfer left bloc.
We made it clear that actually any party that considered themselves on the left should rule out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and offer people a clear alternative to 100 years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, including the Labour Party.
You didn't write
the problem was none of them were willing to do that, and we think we have paid a price for the absence of a strong left alliance that challenged this government, that offered an alternative, and that was willing to rule out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Because what it sent is a signal to many of those who wanted change that even some of the opposition parties didn't believe change was possible.
But you didn't write.
That was a mistake in our view.
But you wrote to the other parties.
We would be very happy if the Labour Party stayed out and were part of a genuine left alliance, along with other parties, because they had clearly indicated their willingness to prop up Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and we could see even this week they're engaged in negotiations with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael over the possibility of propping them up again. We think that's a huge mistake. They shouldn't do it. They should learn the lessons of the past and actually work with other parties of the left to form a decent left opposition to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and campaign on the issues that matter. I do want to let the others speak, just because I've gone on a little bit too long, if that's okay.
I have one question to you first, Richard, if you don't mind. You talk about forming a coalition on the left. Would you be comfortable with forming a coalition with the Social Democrats if Owen Hayes remains a TD for that party, given that he held shares in Palantir until this year? He's free to say when exactly this year or how much money he profited in the back of it.
Well, I'm very, very uncomfortable with the revelations that have emerged, and I certainly think he should answer honestly the questions that have been asked about when he divested himself in those shares. Did he profit?
He first profited. The shares went up 62% since he got
Well, I think it's frankly outrageous that anybody who would consider themselves on the left would have profited from the massacre of Palestinians or would work in any way with companies that were providing Israel with the means to kill Palestinians. So I think that's pretty outrageous. And I think he should answer those questions, and I would fully expect that any party that has stood in the Dáil or publicly and said they stand with the Palestinians to seriously investigate that matter and come out with clear statements as to what they have found in their investigations. But I'm obviously not over all the details, but he should answer the questions honestly.
But just on your position, I mean, do you think that would be a barrier for you entering a coalition, even an opposition coalition with Social Democrats if you remain there?
I think in the first instance, rather than get into that, I think he should answer the questions. But let's make it clear, we are for having sanctions on Israel and for boycotting any company that has anything to do with providing any support to Israel as it perpetrates genocide and atrocities against the people of Palestine and denies them their basic rights. So I think Deputy Hayes has some very, very serious questions to answer, and I would expect that the Social Democrats who spoke so publicly in solidarity with the Palestinians would want to get answers to those questions as well.
We had him here for 20 minutes and he refused to answer. He just said he'll do them this year. So I just mean from your perspective, would you...
I think he should answer the questions that are being asked. I wasn't aware of what he said earlier on, but he should answer the questions that would be asked, and it would be completely unacceptable that anybody at all should profit from the atrocities that Israel is perpetrating against the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine. That's completely unacceptable to us.
Would it stop you forming a left coalition with Social Democrats if you remain there?
Well, we're talking about the actions of one deputy, so let's see what the Social Democrats do and see what Deputy Hayes does to clarify this matter. But it is completely, I mean, we're very clear about this. We think that it is utterly unacceptable, unconscionable that anybody would profiteer from the mass murder and the persecution and oppression of the people of Gaza or Palestine generally. I think that speaks for itself, and it's a fairly clear and unequivocal statement, Craig.
Okay. So just to add to that, it's great to be back, because no matter what government is formed, what we will be doing is forming a strong left socialist bloc in the Dáil that will represent ordinary people, working class people, everyone who's facing discrimination and oppression, and that's what we were elected to do. And I think one of the key things that we bring to the table that isn't brought by other groups is we organise outside in communities, among those who want to fight back against the system and the oppression that they're facing. So change hasn't been delivered via the ballot box, the change that so many people, particularly young people, wanted. And I think that's very disappointing for them and for us. But I think we now have to look at how can we build movements outside. I think we call on the left and the trade unions to organise people power movements that have delivered change before. For example, on the water charges, on repeal, which was a grassroots movement of women, of young people, of LGBT plus people, and even more recently in relation to autism school places, where parents all around the country have said no, we will not accept second-class citizenship for our children, and they and the disabled community in general. One of the most positive things that's happened politically in the last year from the outside has been that disabled people and carers have come together and really made an impact. So I think that that's what we believe. The left, we need a left bloc in the Dáil, but it has to be one that's anti-capitalist, that's actually going to challenge the vested interests. The wealth, the resources that are there have to be used to eradicate the housing crisis, to bring in real rent controls, to build on council and state lands, public and affordable housing, and to provide the health care and the education that every single person in this country needs. And with regard to Labour, the Social Democrats, Sinn Féin, and those who got a vote that was perceived to be left, we should form a bloc in the Dáil. We're very interested in we will communicate that with them and talk to them about that. But we also need to now look at outside how we're going to bring change, because we are up against Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and probably a right-wing cabal of TDs who are going to back them up.
So. I think for lots of people, the outcome of the election is disappointing. It's disappointing for us. In reality, what is going to happen is a changing of the mudguard for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And for those who are now auditioning to be a new mudguard for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, there is a very, very sharp and stark lesson in what happened to the Green Party, obviously almost entirely wiped out. We think it is a very major mistake for anyone who has a perception of being left, with the votes of people who are looking left, to seek to go into coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and to manage this really rotten system which results in such terrible crisis for people in terms of housing, in terms of healthcare, in terms of basic rights for disabled people and for children in particular. Those problems will not be solved by Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael governments that represent those who profit from those crises, the big speculators, private hospital and insurance industry, and so on. So we think the lesson is there. It's up to others whether they learn that lesson or not. I would also make the point that if you look at the exit poll result for Sinn Féin voters, Sinn Féin voters were not voting for Sinn Féin to go into coalition with Fianna Fáil. They were voting for an alternative. They were trying to find a road for very, very significant change. And for Sinn Féin to pursue the route of saying we're going to have discussions with Fianna Fáil and effectively, hold out hope that there could be a Fianna Fáil Sinn Féin government, we think again would be to disappoint those who voted for Sinn Féin looking for change, because Fianna Fáil in such a government will again be there to represent the interests of the big developers, the corporate landlords, and so on. Yeah?
Yeah, the question in relation to the emphasis on outside politics.
Yeah.
What do you guys mean by that? Do you mean lawful demonstrations and marches?
Yeah.
Or do you mean occupations of civil disobedience?
That's lawful as well.
We mean, if you look at the big changes that have taken place in this country over the past 10 years, those changes did not come about from Leinster House. They were often finally legislated for in Leinster House after people went on journeys apparently uninfluenced by the mass movements we had in society. But two good examples, and there are others, obviously is the movement for repeal, which was a mass movement, including civil disobedience, including mass protests, including organising, pushing for a referendum, including fighting that referendum campaign, and which won very, very substantial change in this country in terms of abortion rights. We're still not all the way there. We still have significant problems. We'll be continuing to raise that in the next Dáil. Or the issue of the water charges, where, let's be clear, there was a very, very big majority for the water charges in the Dáil when I was elected in a by-election that became about the water charges, and we beat them, not because there was more of us in there than there was of them, but because there was more of us out there than there is of them in society. And that's what we base ourselves on, is people power is the way to deliver change.
You
You
also
have-
trapped 2 women in a car.
no, I didn't trap 2 women in a car. There was actually a criminal trial about that. You might be interested. And there was a jury trial about that, which found unanimously that we were not guilty of trapping 2 women in a car. But feel free to print that in your newspaper. If you look at the movement that is the biggest movement in Irish society today, is the movement for solidarity with Palestine. It's repeatedly still putting tens of thousands of people on the streets over a year, incredibly, after a genocide started. That has forced some sort of change by the government, but it's all too little, too late. So, for example, the Occupied Territories Bill, this was dangled in front of the electorate in advance of the election after hanging around for 6 years, not being progressed, being deliberately delayed. The government promised before the election, this will now happen, under pressure from that movement. Now, our job on the issue of Palestine is to be in there and saying, okay, you made this promise, what's that going to look like? Are you going to water it down? We need really meaningful sanctions. And that's our approach in terms of housing, in terms of the excess water charges, which are now on the agenda, again, in terms of Palestine, in terms of disability justice. And it is that combined approach. We think that's how we deliver change for the people we represent.
Paul, should Owen Hayes donate the money he made from the shares of Palantir to Palestinian causes, do you?
I think that's a very good suggestion. I didn't come up with that suggestion. You came up with this yet, but that is a good suggestion. Yes, I think it is unconscionable that someone who's a member of a party which, stands in opposition to the genocide, stands in solidarity with the Palestinians, would personally profit. I do think, by the way, there are questions for the Social Democrats here about when they knew. I know that when this first came out, they said they had no awareness of him working for Palantir. Like, I had an awareness because it had been reporting previously, but that's obviously for them to answer.
I guess that was to do with the shareholding rather than his work
Yeah.
there. But I asked Richard, would you be comfortable being in a left coalition with Owen Hayes, knowing what you know now?
Well, again, I think the questions are currently in the court of Owen Hayes and the Social Democrats. I understand, and I had seen earlier that there was an unsatisfactory engagement on the plinth and a failure to answer those questions. For now, what we're saying is he should answer those questions, the Social Democrats should answer those questions, and then we'll see where we are.
Paul, yourself and Richard have both spoken there about lessons to be learned from this election, lessons that others need to learn. But is there any lessons for people for profit and solidarity? I mean, you've reduced your seat share in this stall. What kind of reflection are you doing internally?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, it's just like nationally, we actually, as a group, increased our vote, but unfortunately, we didn't fall that way in terms of seats. In contrast to the Labour Party, whose vote didn't actually increase, but they got more seats. Sometimes that's the way it happens. Nick Barry, for example, lost out by 35 votes in Cork North Central. We could have had another TD here. 20 people voted a different way. So it's unfortunate, and obviously we're unlucky then in other places too. But I think what we need to look at now is there are some people there who are very strong and can win seats again in the future.
Is it just unluckiness though?
Can I just add
Yeah.
something too? Yeah, the thing that I regret is that we didn't have a mass movement on the streets over housing, which is by far the biggest issue and the most motivating issue for people in this election. It was absolutely top of the agenda of priorities in the exit poll, and it was top of the agenda of the majority of people we met on the door. And we did attempt to pull people onto the streets over recent years. We were instrumental in groups like the National Housing and Homelessness Coalition and Raise the Roof. But if there's one big regret I think we have is that we didn't push harder to get people on the streets and be willing, frankly, to mobilise people on the streets even if others weren't willing to. Because that is the issue that is at the centre of most of the hardship, the anger, the suffering, even the skills shortages we have in areas like health and education are all lead back to the lack of affordable and social housing and affordable rents and house prices. So one of our absolute determinations is to push for a mass movement on the streets on the issue of affordable and social housing, and to urge the other parties on the left to help us build such a movement, and indeed the trade unions. Because if we don't do that, the sense of despair and disillusionment a lot of young and working class people our feeling at the moment is only going to grow. So we want to turn despair into resistance and into a positive campaign to solve the housing and homelessness crisis.
Richard,
That would change the electoral arithmetic in our view.
have you been in contact with any of the other party leaders, or have any of them been in contact with you with the prospect of form of government in mind?
No, well, we made it clear that we were going in with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, so we don't want them to contact us, and we don't expect them to contact us.
Sinn Féin?
We have had informal discussions with Sinn Féin, and we have made it clear that we want to see greater left cooperation in the Dáil in opposition to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And
What
we
will that look
will be contacting all of the parties on the left and left independents to suggest precisely that over the coming
Have you
weeks.
spoken to any left independents about trying to form a technical group, given that you'll need 5 times speaker so?
We are in discussions with others on the formation of a technical group, which will be a technical group, right? So, People for Profit Solidarity are the political entity. We're not at the moment contemplating that there will be an expanded political group, but we are in discussions about a technical group, and we hope details of that will be announced in the next few days. But we're not going to speak for those with whom we're discussing, because that wouldn't be fair.
Just on the role of the Labour Party as well, you've called on Labour or any other self-avowed left party not to govern with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. There is a perception within some of those parties that maybe the centrist or conservative instincts of those parties might be blunted if there was to at least to be some left presence within the government rather than all of them being on the outside.
Look, the strategy of parties that would consider themselves on the left propping up Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael has been a disaster every single time. There is not a single good example of parties of the left, or who consider themselves at the left, propping up Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and doing anything other than demoralising the people who voted for them and destroying their own organisation or doing a lot of damage to it. So we're very clear, unique I would say, in saying we have to break the cycle of being mudguards to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
Can I just say on that as well? So I think Fianna Fáil might be keen to get Labour in on one pretext, that they will be quite worried about the growth of the Social Democrats, of Labour, even people moving away from Sinn Féin to a more left direction. So I think you wouldn't rule out that they might decide that. It doesn't look likely at the moment, I'd have to say. I do think a lot of young people voted for the Social Democrats, who would consider themselves left, who consider themselves socialist. That was my own experience in Dublin West. People who were supporting me were voting for Social Democrats if they lived in another area. So I think it's very, very important that they learn the lesson of what's happened before, that this is like an iron law of history, that when left-wing parties go into coalitions with those much bigger, right-wing parties, they get eaten up. And the Greens, the latest example, but it's happened to Labour before, and it will happen again if they do it.
Just in a statement from Owen Hayes, just after putting right now, he said he sold his shares in July this year, so after he got elected, and he made €199,000.
I think that's disgraceful. That it carried on that long after standing for the Social Democrats. You'd be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but that's
Shocking.
really shocking. There's no way that he would have been elected, I'd imagine, had people known that, particularly the youth vote, particularly how many people are looking on the issue of Palestine as just a lightning rod issue for how they don't want the world to be.
That's almost a year after the genocide started. I mean, that's not someone acting in haste to divest themselves. So
I think he should resign his seat as a result of it.
Well, I think it's pretty disgraceful, and if I was the Social Democrats, I would be very, very, very concerned about that, because that flies in the face of what they stood in front of the electorate. That platform in relation to Palestine, profiteering from a genocide, is quite shocking, to be honest. And no such person would be a member of People for Profit Solidarity, I can tell you that.
Do you think he should be expelled?
If he was a member of People for Profit Solidarity, he'd be expelled.
Do you think his election has misled his voters?
Absolutely. There's no way that I just had said about young people voting for the Social Democrats, thinking that they represent certain values, that they knew, for example, Labour maybe didn't represent. and then they find out this, I think people will be absolutely gutted and disgusted. We just had a Holocaust in Gaza this very week. We've had displaced people, families, children burnt alive in tents. We've got, obviously what's happening worldwide, and yet people find out this. And Holly Cairns has questions to answer too about what sort of vetting of candidates is done, because your employment should be very open and very obvious. So I'd like to hear answers on that, definitely.
I agree with all that. I think. Sorry. Obviously, the Dáil is sitting next week. It's probably incumbent on Owen Hayes now to make a statement to the Dáil. We need to see what can be done in terms of arrangements, that there can be questions. I also think he needs to answer questions to the media now again. You know what I mean? The idea that he comes out here, refuses to answer, then presumably sends out a written statement and hopes to just move on. It's very, very poor behaviour.
Shares were sold in July, they would have been worth about $28 a piece, which is double what they were worth the previous years.
It's absolutely shocking. I mean, that's direct profiteering from a genocide. I mean, massacre. It's absolutely shocking. I'm rarely shocked in politics, but that is absolutely horrendous. So I would expect that the Social Democrats are going to have to take urgent action on that, and explanations need to be forthcoming as to what's going to happen.